Imagine stepping into a room where every gaze makes you feel like an outsider, where every hushed word questions your worth, and your fiercest competitor has just resorted to underhanded tactics. Yet you emerge from that very room, the championship trophy firmly in your grasp. This isn't a fictional tale. It's a true story about Jessica Bennett, a young black woman from the underprivileged 7th Ward of New Orleans. She shook the foundations of the Ivy League by exposing a system rooted in bias and injustice at Yale's national debate tournament. Stay with us until the very end, because the way Jessica transforms pain and prejudice into the power to turn the tables is a lesson you'll carry with you forever. 17-year-old Jessica Bennett stands before the grand gates of Yale University. It's her first time here, her initial foray into a world she's only known through books, television, and the hopeful stories her mother used to share. The historic buildings loom even taller and colder against the crisp autumn air. Jessica takes a deep breath, smoothing the threadbare blazer her mother painstakingly saved for months to buy from a thrift store. She steps into the main auditorium, where dozens of elite students from the nation's most prestigious schools have gathered for the national debate tournament. The moment Jessica crosses the threshold, every conversation in the room falters, just long enough for her to feel the shift. Scrutinizing, uneasy glances sweep over her. They aren't just observing her outdated blazer and worn sneakers, but also her natural curls, a feature she's always cherished, yet now a magnet for judgment and derision. Whispers drift from her left, where a group of impeccably dressed white students exchange knowing looks. "Look at her," a blonde girl laughs, loud enough for Jessica to hear. "This is Yale debate, not a community picnic." Jessica feels her hands tremble. She wills herself to stand firm, eyes fixed straight ahead, determined not to reveal the turmoil within. But then another voice cuts through the silence with disdain. "Who even let someone like her in here?" The question slices through the already stifling air like a blade. Jessica's chest tightens, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She's heard variations of this before, but here in these revered halls celebrated for intellect and civility, it stings more than ever. Clutching her debate notebook, she fights to steady herself. Somewhere in her mind, her mother's words echo. "Jessica, the world isn't always fair, but you must stand your ground. They can't take your worth unless you let them." She draws a deep breath and forces her feet forward. Jessica knows that to conquer this unfamiliar world of bias and barriers, she must summon a strength she never knew she possessed. Jessica had just found a small spot by the window to calm her still racing heart when a distinct voice shattered the last vestiges of peace she'd managed to grasp. "Are we recruiting community volunteers this year, Professor?" A wave of mocking laughter swept through the room. Jessica turned to see who had spoken, and for the first time she recognized the face. Tyler Montgomery. He was tall, sharp-featured, with cold blue eyes that held the smug arrogance of inherited wealth. His navy blazer was custom-tailored, and a tiny, gleaming pin on his lapel subtly announced his family's prestige. Tyler Montgomery wasn't just any top student from a storied Boston prep school. His family had been among Yale's most generous benefactors for generations. Everyone in the auditorium knew it, which was why his cutting remark went unchallenged. Heat flared on Jessica's cheeks as if dozens of eyes were burning her skin. She lowered her head slightly, struggling to hide her humiliation, even as her pride recoiled. Before she could utter a word in protest, her gaze met that of Professor Emily Grant. Professor Grant was known as Yale's toughest critic. Her stern demeanor and sharp, metal-framed glasses made her expression unreadable. She adjusted the papers in her hand, then slowly turned her eyes back to Tyler. "That's enough, Montgomery. Don't waste our time." Her words were soft, yet they commanded the room into absolute silence. Then her gaze shifted to Jessica, and in that moment, Jessica felt the same shadow of doubt from this respected authority figure. Clearly, even Professor Grant wasn't entirely convinced that Jessica belonged here. Tyler slid back into his seat, unrepentant, a smug smile curling at the corner of his mouth. He didn't need words, his triumphant look said it all. A blonde girl beside him leaned in and whispered loud enough for Jessica to catch. "She actually thinks showing up with that hair and that cheap blazer means she's our equal. Pathetic." Jessica clamped her mouth shut, her heart pounding in her chest. But this time it wasn't just shame or pain. A different feeling ignited. Anger, a rising will to resist. Jessica had never shied away from a fight. And now more than ever she realized this wasn't merely a debate competition. This was a battle to prove her true worth in front of people who believed they were superior. She took a deep breath and gripped her debate notebook even tighter. She couldn't let Tyler Montgomery or anyone here continue to look down on her. She had come to Yale with a clear mission, and now she was more determined than ever to transform today's contempt into the fuel that would propel her forward. Slowly, Jessica lifted her head, her eyes steely with resolve, fixed on the debate podium, where her real fight was about to begin. As the auditorium doors closed behind her, Jessica hurried out, attempting to conceal the shame and rising anger in her chest. Her steps carried her almost instinctively to the library, a quiet yet unfamiliar space, its dark mahogany shelves towering like silent reminders that she didn't belong here. She scanned for a seat, but nearly every table was occupied. Small groups of students clustered together, animatedly discussing debate topics. Confident laughter echoed around her. Jessica stood alone, uninvited by anyone. When her eyes met a few familiar faces from earlier, they quickly looked away as if she were invisible. At last she sank into a small table tucked into the farthest corner, hidden behind a weathered bookcase. The hard wooden chair felt cold against her back, making her feel more isolated than ever. Jessica gently set her debate notebook on the table. The soft thud sounded lonely in the quiet room. She pulled out her phone, her hand trembling as she saw a message from her mother, Catherine. Jessica's heart softened a bit when she recognized her mother's profile picture. Her gentle, encouraging smile, the same one that had buoyed her through so many difficult times in the 7th Ward. The message was brief but filled with all her mother's love, faith and hope. You don't need to be like them. You just need to be better than them. Jessica read those words over and over, feeling her mother's reassurance melt away the chill that Tyler and the others had just buried in her heart. Her mother's message fueled her resolve. Her worth came not from clothes, hair or skin color, but from the mind and talents she possessed. Taking a deep breath, Jessica opened her worn debate notebook. Its pages were packed with notes she'd compiled over weeks of preparation. She flipped to a carefully bookmarked page, its bold heading clear before her. Her heart skipped a beat. She covered her mouth to hide the rush of emotion. Even making the cut was proof, however small, that she'd been recognized. A quiet, humble joy blossomed in her chest. But that spark of happiness was quickly snuffed out by cruel whispers behind her. It's ridiculous she got through, a girl's voice murmured loud enough for Jessica to hear. They must be showing off their diversity. More mocking laughter rippled around her. Jessica recognized Tyler's friends, the elitist clique, casting half-disbelieving, half-contemptuous glances her way. Tyler stood at the center, arms folded, his cold eyes drifting over the results. A vicious smile flickered on his lips as he read her name at the bottom. He drawled loud enough for those nearby to hear, "A miracle, huh?" His friends burst into amused laughter. Jessica felt her heart tighten again at the sting of his cruelty. But this time, instead of letting it hurt her, she stood tall and silent, chin lifted in quiet pride. She knew their jeers couldn't change her true worth. She'd advanced on her own merits and determination, and that was the unshakable truth, whether Tyler admitted it or not. Tyler's gaze locked on Jessica with a challenging glint. He seethed at her unusual composure. To him she'd been nothing more than a token participant, someone to fill a slot. Now she'd become a thorn in his side he could no longer ignore. Jessica turned and walked away, her eyes shining with resolve. She reminded herself this was only the first step. The real battle still lay ahead. Now more than ever she understood that to prove she belonged here she would have to out-debate not only skilled opponents, but also the deep-seated prejudice that Tyler Montgomery embodied. She moved steadily down the long, echoing corridor, her gaze fierce and unyielding. In that moment, Jessica vowed that no matter what came next, she would never again let people like Tyler steal her confidence or her resolve. The dorm hallway's pale yellow lights flickered as Jessica hurried back to her room. The fragile thrill of making it through the first round was already giving way to creeping anxiety. She'd barely shut the door behind her when her phone, tucked in the inside pocket of her blazer, buzzed urgently. The screen lit up with a stern notification bearing Yale's official logo. A new email from the debate committee. Jessica opened it quickly, her heart pounding when she read the subject line. Urgent notice, topic change for next round. A cold shiver ran down her spine as her trembling fingers scrolled through the message. It stated in no uncertain terms that due to unforeseen circumstances, the next round's topic had been switched to something entirely different: the impact of social media on the decline of traditional social interaction. Jessica glanced at the clock. Less than 10 hours remained until it was her turn to speak. Her mind felt like a storm. She'd spent the past week researching and preparing for the original topic, the importance of racial diversity in education. This new prompt was completely foreign, a rapid current dragging her off course without warning. Still, Jessica drew a deep breath, forcing herself calm. She couldn't quit now. With eyes red from fatigue and worry, she spent the entire night at her battered laptop, devouring articles and furiously scribbling notes in her notebook. Time slipped away like sand through her fingers, each minute heavy with tension. The next morning, Jessica entered the debate hall pale and hollow-eyed from her all-nighter. She forced a steady expression even though inside she felt shattered. Before she could find her seat, Professor Grant strode over. Her usual stern poise and icy gaze aimed straight at Jessica. "Jessica." The professor's voice was flat, almost frozen. "How prepared are you?" Flustered, Jessica raised her phone. "Professor, I received an email last night about the topic change. I've been working to catch up." Grant frowned and cut her off sharply. "What email?" "There's been no change." Jessica's heart stopped. She held out her phone for the professor to see. After a tense moment, Grant's tone turned icy. "That email is a forgery. The topic remains, the importance of racial diversity in education. If you do not address the announced topic, you will be disqualified immediately." A stir ran through the competitors. Some glanced at Jessica with skeptical, pitying, even mocking looks, but most striking was Tyler's face. He stood nearby, eyes gleaming with triumph at her shock. He smirked cruelly, leaning in so she could hear, "Oops, tough break." Jessica froze, breath catching in her throat. Now she understood. This was a deliberate plot against her, and the only person with both motive and means was Tyler, the same person who'd seen her as a thorn in his side from the start. Her heart flooded with conflicting emotions: anger, fear, helplessness. She met Tyler's gaze and saw not just mockery, but a cold, ruthless cruelty that showed no sympathy for her pain. For a moment, Jessica faced the hardest choice of her life: give up and bow to this dirty trick, or step up to the podium unprepared and fight on. Then her mother's words rang in her mind: "You don't need to be like them. You just need to be better than them." Jessica clenched her fists, her eyes lighting up with a renewed, fierce resolve. She inhaled deeply and started toward the podium, her face set, entirely undeterred by the doubtful stares around her. Because she knew now that she wasn't just fighting to prove her own ability. She was confronting a dark scheme, the prejudice and bias determined to silence her. This time she would not be quiet. She would fight to the end. Jessica's footsteps rang out soft but sure as she climbed onto the debate stage. The auditorium fell completely silent, every eye fixed on her. A tiny black girl thrown into the toughest situation imaginable. From the front row, Tyler leaned back with arms crossed, his expression a smug mix of satisfaction and amusement. In his mind, Jessica was like a fledgling trapped in a snare, weak, awkward, utterly helpless. She took a deep breath, steadying her trembling hands. Her gaze swept over the vast hall, but the anxiety was gone, replaced by calm sincerity. Then Jessica began, her voice gentle yet resonant with determination. "I apologize if my presentation today isn't as polished as you might expect, but I believe this is exactly the moment to speak about something I've experienced most authentically." The crowd held its breath as she continued. "I grew up in the 7th Ward, a small neighborhood in New Orleans that many of you have probably never heard of. There, technology and social media in particular wasn't just part of life. It was our only bridge to the outside world." Jessica paused, her tone even but stirring as she recounted the hardest days after her father was lost in Hurricane Katrina. She spoke of her mother who turned to social media to beg for relief amid a city in despair, and of the online community that rallied to help them rebuild from nothing. Admissions, discrimination, reality, and impact. With clenched teeth, she began pulling up research websites, meticulously jotting down each argument, each statistic about biased admissions and unequal educational opportunities for white and non-white communities. Jessica's eyes lit up as she reviewed strong evidence, fueling her determination to change minds like Tyler Montgomery's. Across the library, Tyler sat with his clique, occasionally glancing toward Jessica's hidden corner, then turning back to his friends with a mocking grin. "Think a few hours of reading will make up for her background in education?" he sneered casually, twirling his Mont Blanc pen. "Pathetic." His friends chuckled, some casting pitying, contemptuous looks at Jessica. Tyler's grin turned even more sinister as he leaned in and whispered coldly, "But let her hope. The more she hopes, the more bitter her failure will be. We'll see soon enough." He returned to the group's conversation, brimming with self-confidence, utterly convinced of his own superiority. To Tyler, Jessica was more than a weak opponent. She was living proof of what he believed. Not everyone deserves to be at a place like Yale. In her secluded corner, Jessica didn't hear their jeers, but she felt the prejudice aimed straight at her. Every note she wrote, every piece of evidence she uncovered strengthened her resolve. She reminded herself that the real battle lay ahead. Lifting her head, she gazed through the small window at the stately campus beyond. She vowed, whether they believed in her or not, she would make them listen, because she wasn't just debating for herself, but for her mother and for everyone who had ever been silenced by bias and injustice. The library doors had just closed behind Jessica when she stepped out, clutching her research binder brimming with notes. The pale sunset washed across the vaulted corridor, making the weight on her shoulders feel all the heavier. Jessica whispered her prepared arguments under her breath, her heart steadier now, though the lingering doubt inside her still wouldn't completely fade. As she entered the debate hall, the murmur of the crowd softened to hushed whispers. Students, professors, and stern judges were all seated, waiting to see what this unfamiliar girl, coming from a place many of them had never even heard of, would do when she reached that distinguished podium. Jessica walked forward slowly, her legs no longer trembling. She gently set her notebook down, lifted her gaze to take in the entire room, her eyes strong yet sincere. After a steadying breath, she began in a calm, measured voice, each word enunciated clearly. "I know some of you in this room are probably wondering why I'm standing here and whether I truly belong." She paused for a moment, letting her words settle into the growing silence. Her eyes met those of the very people who had looked at her with doubt and disdain, especially the cold blue stare of Tyler Montgomery, reclining in his seat with arms folded and a mocking smile playing on his lips. She pressed on, her tone now imbued with quiet power. "But that very question proves the point I'm here to make today. Racism and prejudice still run deep in the most prestigious institutions in this country, even the Ivy League." A ripple of uneasy whispers spread through the audience. A few judges exchanged discomfort glances. Professor Grant leaned forward, her sharp gaze appraising. Unfazed, Jessica shared her own story, a black girl from the 7th Ward, describing how she had grown up surrounded by bias and barriers from the earliest age. She spoke softly but sharply of her personal experiences. "I was raised to believe I had to work twice, even 3 times as hard as anyone else, just to earn half the recognition." Each sentence cut like a scalpel into the conscience of the room. Her stories of talent questioned, of skeptical looks whenever she entered any elite space, drew the hall into profound silence. In the back, Tyler straightened in his chair, no longer indifferent. A flash of tension crossed his face before he masked it with his customary sneer. Leaning close enough for those around him to hear, he muttered, "Nice speech, but who's actually going to believe it?" Laughter flickered from his friends, though this time no one dared laugh out loud. A couple of judges glimpsed Tyler with frowns of disapproval. Jessica met Tyler's gaze head-on, calm yet resolute, as if responding directly to his arrogance. "Maybe you won't believe me. But I'm not here asking for your belief. I'm here to remind you that racism isn't only found in outright slurs, but in the silence, in the doubtful glances we cast at someone simply because they're different." Her final words rang out like a declaration. She concluded with a gentle nod, then stepped back, maintaining her composure and confidence. For a heartbeat, the hall remained silent. No applause came immediately, but many faces shifted from doubt to surprise and then to quiet respect. Professor Grant jotted a few notes, the corners of her mouth lifting in a barely perceptible smile, proof that Jessica had accomplished what no one expected. Tyler Montgomery sat motionless, his once cocky expression fractured. Inwardly, something unfamiliar stirred. The realization that Jessica Bennet was not just some poor underclass girl he could easily dismiss with a quip or a sneer. She had dared to stand on the very platform he'd always assumed was his and challenge everything he stood for. Tyler tightened his grip on his expensive Mont Blanc pen, trying to conceal the discomfort rising within him. Jessica had just issued a challenge, and he knew that from this moment on their contest would be about far more than debate skills. It would be a battle between pride and prejudice, one he could not afford to lose. As the last thin ripple of applause faded, Jessica stepped down from the podium, each footfall echoing with a mix of relief and lingering nerves. Though she kept her face calm, her heart still fluttered. She knew this debate might not instantly erase their biases, but at least she had made them listen, even if just for a moment. Among all the eyes on her, the cold gaze of Tyler Montgomery stood out most. He said nothing further, but his earlier sneer had vanished, replaced by a scowl of displeasure. Tyler hated to admit it, but her speech had unsettled him, not because of her arguments, but because of the unwavering courage she'd shown before everyone. An hour later, the list of semi-finalists appeared on the large bulletin board outside the hall. Competitors surged forward, eager to find their names. Jessica waited until the crowd thinned, her pulse pounding, reminding herself that she'd given her all, and whatever the outcome she would accept it. Her eyes scanned down to the very last entry, 12. Jessica Bennet, 7th Ward High School, New Orleans. I'm not here to argue that social media is all good or all bad. But I can say this, for a black girl like me, technology was the only bridge to hope. That virtual world saved my family's life and made me believe that out there someone cares about small voices like mine. A profound silence settled over the hall. Judges listened intently. Some even set their pens down, forgetting to tack I have the right to speak, and technology, social media gave me that right. I only hope that everyone in this room remembers, behind every screen is a real person, a real heart beating, and every word, every action we take can change someone's life. She stepped back from the podium, and for a heartbeat the silence lingered before the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It was genuine admiration. Jessica blinked back tears, stunned by the recognition from people who had once looked at her with dewy notes. Professor Grant's cold stare softened for the first time, revealing something like understanding and perhaps respect. Jessica closed her speech, emotion still resonating in her final words. I may not have arrived here in the most perfect way, but I believe. In the front row, Tyler sat frozen. His earlier smugness had vanished, replaced by a clear unease on his arrogant face. He couldn't fathom how Jessica had flipped the script so quickly. She should have collapsed under the pressure. Yet here she was, receiving a standing ovation he had never seen before. Tyler's former cronies also fell silent. They no longer dared exchange mocking glances. Their scorn and contempt had turned into embarrassment mixed with a pang of guilt they didn't want to admit. Meanwhile, Professor Grant leaned over her score sheet, jotting down a note with an almost imperceptible smile. Jessica recognized that look. She had impressed Yale's toughest, coldest critic. As Jessica left the stage, her steps felt more confident than ever. She knew challenges still lay ahead, but now she had unshakable faith in herself. Once again, her mother's words echoed in her mind. You don't need to be like them. You just need to be better than them. Jessica smiled softly, her eyes shining with pride. Today, in front of the most skeptical audience, she had not only survived a round, she had proven to everyone, especially Tyler Montgomery, that she was not to be underestimated, and the real battle between her and Tyler was only just beginning. As the last round of applause died away, Jessica stepped out of the debate hall with a mix of joy and relief. But her celebration was cut short when she spotted Professor Grant's familiar steely gaze watching her from down the hallway. Grant gave a subtle nod, an unspoken signal that she wanted to see Jessica immediately. Jessica swallowed hard and followed the professor into a small room at the end of the corridor, where a single desk lamp cast a muted glow across Grant's inscrutable face. Miss Bennet, Grant began the moment the door closed behind them. Her voice was low and precise, her sharp eyes never leaving Jessica's face. I must admit, your performance today was far more impressive than I anticipated. Jessica hesitated, dipping her head in gratitude for the rare praise, but she sensed this wasn't mere flattery. Grant moved slowly to her desk, picked up a thin dossier, and fixed Jessica with a serious look. However, there's a far more serious matter I need to discuss with you, Grant continued, setting the folder down decisively. I asked our IT department to investigate last night's bogus email. The findings make it abundantly clear that the culprit behind this was none other than Tyler Montgomery. The name cut through the tense silence like ice. Jessica felt her heart clench. Though she had suspected it, hearing the confirmation from Professor Grant crystallized the reality. She was up against someone willing to stoop to any level to eliminate her. Her body shook briefly, but she lifted her chin and met Grant's eyes, her voice trembling only slightly but full of resolve. I know he doesn't want me here, but I didn't come here to bow to anyone. In that moment, Jessica's courage and determination shone so brightly that Grant, a professor not easily impressed, allowed herself the slightest, almost imperceptible smile. Her expression softened, revealing genuine respect for the young woman before her. I respect your spirit, Jessica, Grant said quietly. But you need to understand that victory can make someone dangerous. Tyler isn't just an outstanding student. His family wields significant influence at Yale. And more importantly, his pride has been deeply wounded by your unexpected success. Jessica listened in silence, her breathing steadying though her heart pounded fiercely. Grant's tone grew grave as she continued. I can't expose this publicly right now. We need more concrete evidence, but I have to warn you, be very careful. Not everyone here wants to see you win. There are deeper forces at play than you realize, and Tyler is not the type to give up after a single defeat. Jessica felt the weight of that warning. She understood now that she wasn't merely debating Tyler. She was the target of a scheme by someone determined to protect his wounded pride and status by any means necessary. Still, she only nodded, her eyes free of fear, brimming instead with quiet determination. I understand, Professor, Jessica replied firmly. But if he thinks dirty tricks like that will make me stop, he's badly mistaken. Grant studied her for a long moment, then nodded respectfully. She walked to the door, paused, and offered one last encouragement. Very well, Jessica. Then show us all exactly that. You deserve to stand on Yale's most prestigious stages. When the door clicked shut behind Professor Grant, Jessica stood alone in the dim light, reflecting on the battle ahead. Tyler had chosen to confront her directly, and this time she had no intention of backing down. She drew in a deep breath, knowing the greatest challenge still awaited. Yet she felt no hesitation. This contest was no longer just a debate. It was a fight to protect her own worth against those who had used power and influence to crush dreams like hers. Looking out the window at the dusk turning to night, Jessica vowed silently. If Tyler Montgomery believed she would bow under pressure, he was completely wrong. She was ready to face him no matter the cost. And above all, she believed this time she would triumph because she was fighting for something far bigger than herself. After her conversation with Professor Grant, Jessica stepped out of the small room with a swirling mix of anxiety and fierce determination. The hallway before her was quiet, her footsteps echoing softly in the gathering dusk. In that moment she had only one thought. No matter what Tyler or anyone else did to try to stop her, they could never snuff out the unbreakable will she'd carried all along. The next morning, Yale's grand auditorium was flooded with light and a special kind of tension for the semi-final round. Jessica entered and immediately spotted Tyler's gaze fixed on her from a distant corner, cold and sharp as a blade, brimming with hatred and malice like never before. He said nothing, but that icy smile on his lips told Jessica he was rooting for her failure more than anyone. Her opponent this round was Emma Carlson, a white student famed for her prowess at a prestigious New Jersey prep school. Emma was known for flawless debating technique, captivating delivery, and an uncanny ability to sway an audience's emotions. Jessica had watched Emma's earlier rounds and knew this would be the greatest challenge she'd faced so far. Emma took the podium first. Tall and striking with golden hair and a soothing voice, she confidently laid out her arguments on the role of technology and social media during times of crisis. Every piece of evidence was precise, every point clearly articulated, each phrase carefully crafted to move the crowd. Jessica listened intently, her heart racing as she realized she had to respond in a way that was not just competent, but extraordinary, not only to advance, but to shatter the prejudices still surrounding her. When it was Jessica's turn, the hall fell into a tense hush. Tyler sat up straight, his icy glare seeming to bore right through her, waiting for her to stumble. Jessica drew a deep breath, looked out at the audience and spoke in a soft but resonant voice. When I was 9 years old, I lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. Our home, my school, my friends, everything I knew was swept away in a matter of hours. The room was completely still as she continued, her voice steady now and full of heartfelt emotion. I remember those endless days when my mother and I were cut off from the world. No power, no news, and no hope. Then social media changed everything. A small plea for help on Facebook spread like wildfire, and strangers from around the globe began to reach out, sending food, water, and the kindness we never imagined we'd receive from people we'd never met. Jessica's voice trembled slightly as she shared that memory, but she pressed on, her eyes shining with gratitude and unmatched strength. Technology taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that we are never truly alone, and that even in our darkest moments, the smallest human connections can work miracles. That is the real power of technology and social media, not to isolate us but to bring us together and save one another. Across the stage, Emma's usually bright blue eyes welled with tears. For the first time she couldn't maintain her composed exterior. A single tear traced down her cheek as she listened in silence. Jessica's words had transcended debate. They had become a living, breathing story filled with raw, genuine emotion. For a few long seconds the auditorium held its breath. Then it erupted into the most thunderous applause Jessica had ever heard. The judges looked at her with sincere admiration, while Tyler ground his teeth in silent fury, his face pale with frustration and disbelief at her unexpected triumph. As Jessica stepped down from the podium, Emma approached her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, her eyes warm and moved. "Thank you for sharing your story. I really don't know what to say except that you absolutely deserve to be here." Jessica met Emma's gaze with grateful warmth. Two girls from completely different worlds had been united by one heartfelt, powerful story. Professor Grant watched quietly from the side, her usual stern expression now softened in deep satisfaction. She made a note on her score sheet, then gave Jessica a subtle, approving nod. Jessica knew she had just survived one of the toughest rounds. But more importantly, she understood that the final challenge still lay ahead. For Tyler, who glared at her with venomous rage, this semi-final was more than a debate. It was a battle of faith, pride, and justice that she intended to win at any cost. The emotional afterglow of Jessica's semi-final story still hung in the air, but she knew her greatest challenge was yet to come. Tyler Montgomery awaited her in the final, and this time he no longer wore his usual nonchalance or swagger. Instead, his face was cold and ruthless, his eyes laced with bitterness at the realization that Jessica, the girl he had always looked down on, had become the sole obstacle between him and the coveted championship. Yale's main hall was packed with spectators, professors, and the university's strictest judges. The final topic was announced with solemn clarity: the role of traditional institutions in preserving academic values. Tyler strode to the podium first, each step brimming with confidence as if staking his claim to this place. He began in a sharp, proud tone. "Institutions like Yale have always safeguarded our highest academic standards. We stand here today on the foundation of rigorous selection, unwavering tradition, and the protection of everything that opposes these values." He cast a pointed glance at Jessica when he emphasized rigorous selection, clearly insinuating that her background, her status, even her very presence here was unworthy. He continued with a sneer, though never naming her outright. "Of course, institutions sometimes face pressure to diversify, but does that really preserve excellence or simply dilute and undermine the integrity of scholarship?" The hall fell silent. Many in the audience bristled at the subtle attack. Tyler looked around, visibly pleased with himself, then concluded forcefully, "We must never sacrifice our core values merely to meet superficial diversity quotas. Academic excellence must be preserved, defended, and never reduced to a matter of pity or social pressure." When Jessica stepped up to speak, the tension in the room was palpable. Tyler's cold stare bore into her, as if waiting to watch her crumble under his psychological assault. But Jessica did not hesitate. She drew a steadying breath and began, her voice calm yet resolute. "I agree that traditional institutions like Yale protect essential core values. But tell me, do those values mean anything when the same institutions unintentionally erect barriers that keep capable people from even accessing them?" She paused, locking eyes with Tyler in a pointed challenge. If these institutions were truly fair as you claim, I wouldn't have had to fight every single moment just to prove I belong here. Her words struck at the heart of the matter, and for a moment Tyler was visibly shaken. The hall sank into a deeper silence than before. Finally he snapped, unable to contain himself. His face flushed with anger, his usual composure gone. He attacked Jessica directly, his voice shaking with fury. You don't understand, or you're pretending not to. We aren't talking about fairness here. This is about standards. Standards you couldn't meet without so-called diversity preferences. A murmur ran through the judges. Some frowned at Tyler's loss of decorum, but Jessica remained composed. She met his rage with steady compassion. I never asked for pity or special treatment, Mr. Montgomery. I'm here because of my own ability and effort. I'm not afraid of losing any privilege. You are the one who's afraid. Afraid that people like me will shatter the elite facade you cling to. Tyler's fury only intensified. He abandoned all debating skill, launching a personal tirade. And who do you think you are? Preaching about privilege. You're nobody, Bennett. Just a poor girl plucked from nowhere. You will never truly belong here. Jessica let his words hang in the air. Her eyes showed neither anger nor hurt, only clear pity. She needed say nothing more. Tyler had exposed himself fully to everyone's eyes. The hall crackled with tension, whispers spreading like wildfire. Professor Grant shook her head in disappointed disapproval at Tyler's outburst. Then, as Jessica stepped down, the room erupted in genuine, heartfelt applause, not just for her arguments, but for the poise and dignity she displayed in the face of Tyler's venom. Jessica knew today's contest had transcended a mere debate. It had become a battle for values and self-respect. And by standing her ground, she proved to everyone that she not only belonged here, but was stronger than anyone could have imagined. No matter the final outcome, she had already won, winning for herself and for all those who fight against prejudice and injustice. The echo of heartfelt applause had barely faded when Jessica realized today's final wasn't just a debate. It had become a symbol of something much greater. In that tense atmosphere, Tyler Montgomery's outburst still rang in everyone's ears, earning him nothing but disapproving glances and disappointed shakes of the head from the judges. When the head judge finally stepped up to announce the result, Jessica felt her heart pounding harder than ever. She glanced at Tyler, pale, his usual arrogance stripped away, replaced by cold desperation. He clenched his fists, clearly sensing defeat closing in. The hall fell so silent you could hear your own heartbeat. The head judge broke open the envelope and proclaimed in a clear, resonant voice, "And the winner of this year's National Debate Tournament for an outstanding and persuasive presentation is Jessica Bennett from 7th Ward High School, New Orleans." Instantly, the auditorium exploded in the most thunderous ovation Jessica had ever known. Those who had doubted her leaped to their feet, applauding with genuine admiration. A group of students of color in the back cheered and wept tears of joy, as if her victory were theirs as well. Jessica stood frozen for a moment, her eyes stinging with emotion, hardly believing this moment was real. Nearby, Tyler's face went ashen. He looked around in despair and fury. The humiliation of losing to the girl he'd always despised tore down his wall of pride. In anger, he shoved his chair aside and stormed out, ignoring the judgmental stares following him. Deep down he knew this wound to his ego might never fully heal, not because of Jessica but because of his own prejudice. As Jessica absorbed the applause, a gentle hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find Professor Grant's usually stern face softened with pride and warmth. The professor grasped Jessica's hand and spoke, her voice unusually warm yet clear. "You didn't just win a tournament today, Jessica. You proved your true worth." Jessica choked back tears as her heart overflowed with the value of that recognition. Professor Grant smiled gently, squeezing her hand, and added with rare emotion, "From the moment you stepped onto this stage, I doubted. But you've shown me that true strength doesn't come from birthright. It comes from resilience and courage. You are the real pride of this tournament." Jessica could only nod, tears streaming down her cheeks in a silent thank you. In that instant she understood her victory was more than a trophy or a medal. It was a shattering of barriers, a powerful affirmation that people like her have every right to stand on the most prestigious stages without ever bowing to prejudice. The applause continued, unwavering. Jessica looked out over the crowd, her chest swelling with a pride and happiness she'd never known. Their eyes were no longer filled with doubt or pity, but with genuine respect. Outside the hall, Tyler marched off in anger, his fists clenched so tightly they ached. He recognized bitterly that in this battle his own arrogance and selfishness had been his downfall. He had not only lost to Jessica, he'd lost to himself. Jessica took a long, deep breath and wiped away her happy tears, gazing at the adoring faces around her. She knew that from this moment on she hadn't just stood up to prejudice. She had begun a journey as a beacon for everyone still fighting to be heard, recognized, and respected. Today's victory belonged not only to Jessica Bennett, but to all those who have never been acknowledged yet have held on to the belief that one day they too could rise and compel the world to see their true worth. As the final applause faded and the stage lights went dark behind Jessica, she truly felt the weight of her victory. Standing alone in Yale's quiet corridor, she realized she had gained more than a prestigious award. She'd earned the recognition and respect of those who once doubted her. Just as Jessica was about to leave the hall, she caught sight of Tyler Montgomery in the distance. He stood motionless, his face pale and shoulders slumped under an immense burden. A professor approached him, stern-faced, holding a thin white envelope stamped with the university seal. Jessica sensed the tension in their exchange and knew something significant had happened. A few days later, Jessica received a private summons from Professor Grant. In the professor's modest office, Grant spoke calmly but with icy clarity. "Jessica, I want you to know the investigation is closed. Tyler was indeed behind the forged email meant to undermine you. The university has decided to handle this discreetly to protect Yale's reputation." Jessica listened in silence, her heart tightening. She'd suspected Tyler, but hearing it confirmed by Professor Grant left her unexpectedly hollow. There was no triumph in this revelation, only a deep sadness. Sadness that Tyler's own fear and insecurity had driven him to such a deplorable act. Grant studied her thoughtfully and asked, "How do you feel about this?" Jessica lifted her head, her eyes steady and resolute. "I believe I can forgive him, but I will never forget that betrayal helped me become so much stronger." Grant offered a rare, satisfied smile and nodded gently. "You've matured beyond all our expectations, Jessica. Keep that spirit alive." As Jessica left the professor's office, she saw Tyler one last time hurrying down the hallway. Their eyes met briefly. He quickly looked away, unable to face her again. Jessica felt not anger, but profound compassion for the young man who had once considered her an enemy. She understood that Tyler's greatest loss wasn't the championship, but the respect he'd sacrificed through his prejudice. Weeks later, Jessica returned home to New Orleans to a joyous welcome from family and friends. As she stepped into her childhood home in the 7th Ward, her mother ran to embrace her, tears of pride and happiness streaming down her face. "I always knew you could do this, Jessica." Jessica hugged her mother tightly, tears of gratitude in her own eyes. For the first time she felt that every scar, every prejudice, and every moment of being underestimated had been worth it because she was stronger, wiser, and ready for her future. A few days after that, a special letter arrived from Yale. Jessica opened it with trembling hands, her heart soaring as she read the formal greeting. "Congratulations, Jessica Bennett. You have been awarded a full scholarship to Yale University. We look forward to welcoming you back not only as a student, but as someone who has proven her true worth." Her mother wept with joy and the whole family celebrated with pride. As Jessica looked around her humble home, memories of hardship flashed through her mind. But now they were overshadowed by hope and the promise of tomorrow. Before long, Jessica Bennett's story from the 7th Ward to Yale's stage spread throughout the community. She became a living symbol of resilience, determination, and courage in the face of prejudice. Young Black girls across New Orleans saw in her an endless source of inspiration, reminding them that no matter one's background or skin color, they have the right to dream and the power to succeed. Tyler, though spared public scandal, carried a deep wound from his own mistakes. He realized that in trying to defeat Jessica he had lost not only the tournament, but his own integrity, his greatest lesson and the highest price he would ever pay. That autumn, Jessica walked back through Yale's gates with her head held high, her heart strong and at peace. She was ready for any new challenge, armed with the confidence, resilience and compassion forged by her journey. Jessica Bennett's story isn't just about winning a debate tournament. It's a testament to courage, extraordinary perseverance, and triumph over racial bias to discover one's true value. She proved that no matter where you come from or the color of your skin, you have every right to dream and the ability to turn those dreams into reality. What do you think of Jessica's decision to forgive Tyler? If it were you, would you have the strength to do the same? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this inspiring story, please hit like and share to help Jessica's journey reach even more people. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next amazing story. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.